What is up guys, it's Jay here again to talk to you about music photography. Surprise! I changed the lighting a little bit. Hopefully it's a bit better and I'm less orange. Turn my light out. So today's video is all about getting into music photography and getting the right settings to actually shoot it correctly. If you've never shot a gig before, if it's something that you're actually interested in doing and you've never done it, this video is for you. So the first thing that you need to do before anything else is make sure that your camera is set to manual. Have you done it? Okay. So when you're setting up to shoot a show, there's three things that you need to think about. It's the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. All part of the exposure triangle. So I always set my shutter speed first, just so I can get an idea of how much give I've got really. With the venue, it really depends on lighting, but I always set a benchmark at about 1/250th of a second. It's a happy medium between too blurry or too quick so that you miss any kind of movement in the person that you're shooting. But if you do have someone that is moving too quickly or an artist that's moving all over the place and you just can't get a tack shot photo of them, then by all means crank that shutter speed up. So you cranked your shutter speed and everything is perfectly tack sharp, but everything now is really unexposed. This is where your aperture helps you out and can really save the day in some cases, providing that you do have the right lens for the situation. I would recommend getting a faster lens, something like a 1.8 or a 1.4. For me personally, I actually use the 35mm 1.4 Art Series lens from Sigma. It's never let me down, but there are other affordable lenses out there like the 50mm 1.8 from Canon that we talked about in my last video. If you watched that, there's a link somewhere. These lenses will allow you to get more light into the sensor to compensate for that high shutter speed. You really want to be keeping your aperture as wide open as possible to ensure that you are letting as much light in, because the venues that you're shooting in probably aren't going to have that much light, or there might be cases where the lighting is pretty much non-existent. It does happen, it has happened, it will happen to you. Get a fast lens. And the last thing that I set is my ISO. I set this last because if you set it first and you set it too high, it will actually introduce a lot of grain into your photos. This is because your ISO controls your sensor's sensitivity to light. So if you're cranking it really, really high, you're making that sensor more sensitive, it's going to get really noisy to the point where you can't actually use the photos, and nobody wants that. So I set this last to make sure that I'm just using it enough to get the exposure just right. Every camera is different. Some cameras are better in low light than others at higher ISOs. So I would just say have a go with your camera and see how far you're able to push it and see what you're comfortable with in terms of grain. Some people like it, and in some cases it does look nice. But I would always say, if you do have a choice between grain and no photo because you didn't want to expose it to the point where there was grain, go with grain, because there's nothing worse than just missing a photo because you didn't want to have a bit of noise. But yeah, that's about it for this video. It's a pretty straightforward one, I guess, in concept, but I put this video out here as a reference if you are ever unsure as to what setting does what, or if you are looking at getting into music photography. I remember when I was first getting into it, there wasn't really anything I felt out there that specifically targeted just music photography. But yeah, that's why I've done it. I hope you found it useful. If you did learn something, please let me know by dropping me a comment below. If you're interested in finding out more about music photography or just chatting to me about it, subscribe, and I'd love to hear your experiences with it and how you got into it, or even if you think I'm completely wrong in this video and you've got settings that are better, let me know in the comments. I'm always up for learning something new, and that's what this is all about. But yeah, thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to watch this, and I will see you in the next one. That was cringe.